Mackenzie Institute's conference, Canada's Defence Policy Review, the Geopolitical Context 2020-2050. I would like to thank you all for being here today to discuss a very important topic. Today we're fortunate to have a wide range of speakers and experts from all over the world joining us to talk about the important issues facing Canada, its allies and partners. The Government of Canada has embarked upon a review of its defence policy, and as such, it should ensure that this reflects the current challenges that we face. Through these panels, the Mackenzie Institute hopes to engage in substantial discussion that will ensure that the defence policy review reflects Canada's security needs. On that note, I was asked to provide a little context. The title today is Canada's Defence Policy Review. In that regard, I was asked to look at some of the issues, short and long term, that incorporate scientific, technological, economic, resource, and environmental issues. As I'm not a futurist, I will admit to duly exploiting the January 2017 National Intelligence Council report, as well as the 2016 article by Dr. Jason Lecharity and Lieutenant Colonel Richard Lecharity entitled Addressing Canada's 21st Century Security Challenges, Is a Coherent and Defence Strategy Possible?, as well as two studies, Global Strategic Trends out to 2040, and their follow-up report with the same title, Out to 2050. These studies underscored a number of interesting similar global trends and their implications, which I brazenly and unashamedly plundered for this presentation. With that in mind, I would like to identify some of these to set out the future context. This will hopefully spark discussion and provide questions for the various presentations we shall hear today. This period upon which we have focused, 2020 to 2050, will likely be a time of transition, characterized by state and interstate tensions. Global leaders and their respective states will be confronted with a number of challenges, some of which are familiar to us to now: changing climate, rapid population expansion, resource issues, and the resurgence of ideology. It was noted that these challenges cannot be addressed in isolation. Only a collective response will suffice. Global power will likely move from the United States and Europe towards Asia, moving from a unipower world towards a multipolar one. This transference, combined with issues relating to climate change, scarcity of and competition for resources, and population growth, will likely see substantial instability with intense competition between major power centers. Although the United States will likely remain the preeminent military power, their historic hegemonic dominance will likely be on the downslide. Studies argue that globalization will likely continue unabated, assisted by the continuing development of global communications, resulting in a pervasive and non-ending information flow into which much of the global population will be able to tap into. This will likely raise the level of interdependence between states and individuals within the globalized environment. In economic terms, the situation will likely generate winners and losers, especially in the labor market. Life will likely become highly competitive, with the possibility that political leaders may wish to limit globalization to secure their respective populations from any negative effect. The increasingly dependency on global infrastructure will remain vulnerable to potential disruption consisting of air, sea, lines of communication, ports, railroad systems, communication nodes, electric, gas, oil infrastructure, food distributions, financial and banking, as well as educational centers. Therefore, effective security of this global distributed infrastructure will likely be a multinational concern. Climate and environment. Not a day goes by that we do not hear something relating to climate change and environmental issues, as well as the related health implications. In the case of climate change, this will likely amplify the already present tensions and stresses that exist within a society, and as well as in the political and resource realms, any one of which could ignite a conflict. Today, pollution issues weigh heavily upon Chinese city dwellers. More recently, pollution concerns in London, England, were a subject of concern in the media. We face a number of global hazards that pose long-term threats that will require collective effort to address. This will likely continue unabated into the future. Extreme weather patterns, the stress on soil and water resources from growing populations, and the ensuing issues related to food insecurity will directly impact many societies. It is now recognized that rising sea levels, due in part to glacial melting, are impacting areas such as Bangladesh that exist virtually at sea level, as well as concerning owners of Florida beachfront. This is not to forget the threat to numerous Pacific islands and their inhabitants. Ocean acidification poses a serious challenge as it impacts fish populations and the oceanic ability to sustain fisheries and the populations dependent upon it as to a protein source. Water pollution not only destroys the coral, but has a direct impact upon the sensitive marine environment and oceanic breeding grounds. As one biologist noted, the size of tuna, once weighing in at 1,000-pound range, is now at the 250-pound range. We are now consuming the babies. China's expansionist initiatives in the South China Sea underscore the ongoing regional competition to exploit fishing grounds to meet the growing protein demands of China's population. Concomitantly, it underlines the food concerns of other regional state actors that depend upon the same fishing grounds to sustain their respective growing populations. Continued use of hydrocarbons up to and during this period will likely see greenhouse gases increase global temperatures from region to region and possibly exacerbate water management problems in China, India, and Pakistan, as well as other states. Energy, water, and food. It is the contention of a number of futurist studies that there will be sufficient water, food, and energy available to sustain both a growing global population and a global economy. What will be of concern will likely be the effective distribution and access to food and resources, which will be uneven. Regional shortages will occur that will likely spark societal instability and friction between states, likely igniting tensions and conflict. Humanitarian crisis will probably increase as food imports become important to those nations experiencing burgeoning and increasingly affluent populations, particularly India and China. Climate change may open up areas of Siberia and Canada for wider cultivation. The oceans will experience greater exploitation for protein and see the demand for fishing rights in once inaccessible fishing grounds located in the Arctic and Antarctic. Interestingly, in northern Greenland, China and India have research centers monitoring conditions in the Arctic for the purpose of transit and exploitation. Intense urbanization. In the next 20 to 25 years, 65% of the world population, 6 billion people, will be living in urban areas in order to access jobs, resources, and to seek security. This large-scale urbanization will see the greatest increases in Africa and Asia. Urbanized centers will house mass numbers of the population, unserviced slums. Many of these urban areas will experience poor governance and become targets for criminal activity, as well as disaffection. In the latter case, extremist ideologies will take root. Hence, this period will likely experience complex urban insurgencies. This will require a greater appreciation of the dynamics of urban development at all levels of government. Their societies will have to identify early on the characteristics of an instability so that it can be preempted, managed, and addressed. There will be pressures on governance and governing. Populations generally depend upon their respective governments to provide a modicum of prosperity, services, and security. Economic realities such as dramatic geopolitical turbulence, political, cultural, religious polarization, as well as mass migration in some areas will add to the list of challenges that inevitably impact governments and their ability to effectively address the needs of their citizenry. Technological innovation will enable a spectrum of players to delay or circumvent political initiatives and influence the respective population and government. Hence, the management of national, regional, and global issues will inevitably become more difficult and complex as the number of actors vectored to address a certain issue and or problem will likely include corporations, non-government organizations, empowered individuals, as well as state and non-state actors. Working age populations. Drawing upon demographic studies, rich nations are aging while poor nations are not. Recent studies have made it quite clear that working age populations are on the downslide in wealthy countries. In contrast, the situation is reversed in developing states and poor countries in Africa and Asia. Poor economic conditions, lack of employment, poorly planned urbanization, food security, and conflict will continue to contribute to population shifts and migration. To stem such a flow, it will be crucial to have education and economic investment to expedite development in these countries. Western nations will have to address the necessity of increasing their respective populations to support their economies and the expanding demands on their social services for their citizenry. Demographic trends, particularly the youth bulge, will continue to fuel instability in Central Asia, Sub-Saharan Africa, and the Middle East, providing a reservoir of disaffected young men and women with little hope to achieve their aspirations due to limited economic prospects. If hope is not met, this youth bulge will likely be highly susceptible to recruitment by radical elements intent on inciting forcible change. Expect continuing technological advances. As in the past 20th century, the future will experience dramatic and rapid technological advances that will impact the pace of societal change. And, as with any change, new opportunities will be created. Unfortunately, as with any change, there will be winners and losers. The advent of widespread automation and artificial intelligence will change the industrial base faster than economies can adjust, particularly in the realm of employment. Technology will displace workers, and in many cases, this will limit the development of poor states. Wealthier societies will experience longer lifespans as revolutions in medicine, medical techniques, and healthcare, such as genome editing, will be accessible. However, this situation will be replete with the accompanying moral issues, including who gets what and at what cost. The global economy. Weak economic growth will likely continue. Large economies will have to confront the challenges of a shrinking workforce as well as diminishing productivity gains. Like the Depression, Western nations are still experiencing the cascading consequences of the 2008-2009 financial crisis. This situation left many rich nations with a high debt level, weak demands, and serious doubts about the issues surrounding globalization. China will continue to move to a consumer-driven economy, separating itself from a long-standing export and investment focus that has done much to spur its extraordinary economic expansion. In developing countries, there will be likely a lower economic growth, with the result that poverty reduction will be hampered. Ideas and identities. This future era will continue to witness increasingly global connectivity. However, this will likely be experienced amid weak economic growth, particularly in countries with a youth bulge that has aspirations for their future. This connectivity will exacerbate the frustrations and tensions between various states and societies, both internally and externally. National leaders, as well as politicians of all stripe, will seek the populist vote on both the left and right of the political spectrum. Both political leaders will employ nationalism to shore up their constituency and control. The influence of religion in the form of garnering purchase and influence and authority in government will become more salient in some of these regions. Economic drivers will have a positive impact on the status of women and their expanding leadership role and political influence. Notwithstanding, there will be a backlash, as some countries will continue to deny women the opportunity to contribute their multifaceted talents that could greatly expedite and enhance the economy, society, and culture in these developing countries. This period will experience the emergence of new ideologies predicated on a spectrum of religious issues, nationalism, ethnicity, inequality, and the combination of the foregoing. Ideological conflicts will likely continue unabated, utilizing violent means to access influence and achieve their respective political objectives. Migrant and refugee communities will increase in number and political influence, bringing benefits to their new country. Notwithstanding, should these communities fail to successfully integrate, they will likely evolve into pockets of resentment and frustration, which may well provide a pool of frustrated youth susceptible to recruitment by ideologically motivated terrorist organizations. Conflict and WMDs, weapons of mass destruction. Futurists have ascertained that this period will experience an increased risk of conflict due to the expanded terror threat, combined with the likely continuance of political instability in inherently weak nation states. As well, diverging interests among the major powers could see the onset of conflict. The widespread distribution of both lethal and disruptive technologies will make the future world a more dangerous and less stable place. Disruptive technologies applied from afar, as well as long-range precision weapons, robust cyber capabilities, combined with robotic systems, possibly targeting vital or critical infrastructure, will make it problematic to sustain one's citizenry in a safe and secure nation state. Moreover, the ability to make or procure weapons of mass destruction by a state or non-state actor will remain a serious challenge. Some futurists contend that by this period, counter-proliferation issues and initiatives will have failed, and terrorist groups will have already acquired and employed chemical, biological, radiological, or nuclear weapons. Some futurists in a previous epoch said that this would have happened by 2013. Combined with the likelihood that state and non-state actors will be existing in a condition of persistent competition, it is expected that the fundamental nature of conflict will persist. Conflicts will continue to evolve, however, it will remain volatile as actors will seek to combine conventional, asymmetric, irregular methodology in the same time and space across a spectrum of the 5 domains: air, sea, land, space, and cyberspace. Some futurists see conflict involving a range of transnational, state, group, and individual participants that will operate globally and locally, and in some cases there will be a melange of concurrent activity embracing intercommunal violence, terrorism, insurgency, pervasive criminality, and widespread public disorder. Forms of conflict will likely transcend conventional understanding of what equates to regular and irregular military activity. Unfortunately, futurists admit there are few indicators to suggest that the world will become a more peaceful place. Pressures on natural resources, climate, population growth, the transition from west to east, and the ensuing redistribution of power will likely result in increased instability and the likelihood of armed conflict. The thought of war, that of harnessing the full power of the state, total war, or between major powers, or a conflict of that magnitude between liberal democracies, remains unlikely. However, that does not mean that disagreements between major powers over resources, influence, or borders will not occur. Such situations could lead to confrontation, including limited war, where the belligerents exercise restraint. Intrastate conflict, however, will likely remain the most common type of conflict. So what? We exist in a world that is undergoing an unprecedented rate of change in state, regional, and global terms. The convergence of such trends will make governing and effecting cooperation amongst existing actors more difficult and complex. The melange of trends and issues spanning the spectrum of economic, security, technological, as well as religious, social, and cultural issues will inevitably expand the number of players on the world stage to incorporate a spectrum of state and non-state actors, organizations, as well as individuals who have access to or are able to influence in substantial terms. For many states, political order will be difficult to maintain. Governments and their citizenry may have to renegotiate respective expectations and responsibilities to each other. Governments may be unable to support social and health services as done in the past, particularly when experiencing long-term economic slumps, aging population, mass migration that will draw upon an increasingly stressed social and health structure without benefiting it. All we have to do is take a look at the experience of Great Britain's NHS over the last weeks as an indicator of the future. The once semi-predictable days of unipolar world has passed. The Westphalian rules-based international order may well be experiencing a sunset. The new world order has been eclipsed by one that, according to the publication Foreign Policy, aptly described a recent article entitled "Out of Order, the Future of the International System," may well be an indication. Notwithstanding, major players and regional actors will continue to utilize traditional force in all its manifestations to garner their objectives. Although the use of force may facilitate a nation's aims, such achievements may be fleeting. In the future, material forms of power may not be able to provide security. The proliferation of future players married with the access to a spectrum of technologies may very well level the playing field. So what are the takeaways from this? The future remains unpredictable and violent. Conflict will continue to evolve and present new challenges to nation states, and although technology remains important, people will likely continue to be the asymmetric edge when governments are trying to respond to challenges that were expected and unexpected. The next decades will continue to experience an increase in armed conflict predicated on a multipolar world that enables old and new state competitions and rivalries to emerge. This will be facilitated by widespread inequality and grievances caused by expanding populations and the requisite demands, resource scarcity, the cascading consequences of climate change, as well as the importance of religion and ideology. Another issue to surface in the coming decades is the blurring of differences between state, state-sponsored, and non-state adversaries. The range of potential threats will become more diversified as rapidly evolving technology combined with innovative approaches will expose new avenues, i.e. vulnerabilities, to attack and disruption. This combination will provide new means and ways to exploit opportunity. Continued economic prosperity in the coming decades will likely depend on functioning globalized markets, as well as continued access to the global common. It is likely that multilateral military forces will be assigned to secure and protect globalized economies and ensure the supply chains, lines of communication, and space-based infrastructure are protected from destruction or nefarious interdiction. Such interdependence will likely see conflicts having a global dimension, requiring an effective globalized response. As to weapons of mass destruction, we continue to be an ongoing strategic issue. State and non-state actors will continue to seek access to such capabilities. The proliferation of pertinent technical knowledge and expertise, as well as the development of dual-purpose industrial facilities, would make proliferation almost inevitable. Hence, the likelihood of a mass casualty WMD attack by terrorists or rogue state will likely have occurred. The significance and use of soft power to achieve political goals will increase. All elements of national power will likely be wielded by a broader group of actors, including terrorists and insurgent groups, as well as criminal elements. These players will garner an understanding as to how soft power is to be employed to achieve their end state. The ability of state and non-state actors to understand and effectively utilize the combination of hard and soft power will be most advantageous in achieving their respective end states. This will be de rigueur. Military intervention in this era will likely become problematic, due in part to the changing balance of power that will occur. Military intervention conducted by major powers outside their spheres of influence, without multilateral support and permissions, will reduce the inherent ability of major powers to conduct discretionary intervention. Should a military intervention become a necessity, global actors may look at employing proxy forces, thereby hopefully distancing themselves from any consequences. Plausible deniability will be the name of the game. Moreover, covert and clandestine operational methodology will continue to be refined and considered as a normative political military option. Climate change will continue unabated, amplifying a spectrum of political, social, and resource issues and frictions. Humanitarian crisis will likely increase due to climate change, accompanied by a likely change in migration patterns, making border security a vital concern, particularly in developed states. Western military forces will be subject to laws and legislation that will put constraints on their activity to act. Such legislative initiatives will likely embrace everything from greenhouse gas emissions and individual rights to the accountability and conduct of military operations. Such initiatives will make the use of military force more complex and problematic for both the political and military leadership. The influencing of adversaries, as well as at home, the home front, allies and neutral observers, will remain the focus of conflict as perceptions are vital. Military operations are expected to continue to result in casualties. Moreover, the challenge for governments in employing military force will be to clearly demonstrate the requirement so as to garner support for the legitimate use of military force to skeptical audiences both home and abroad. Casualty acceptance and aversion will remain inextricably linked to the public perception of the legitimacy of the military intervention in question. This linkage will become more acute and problematic. In the decades to come, access to hydrocarbons will remain important, and major powers will likely use their respective militaries to safeguard the lines of communication to access secure supplies of hydrocarbons and other resources. Due to climate change, as well as a number of other environmental factors, conflicts over food and water are definite possibilities and may be viewed as wars of survival. The quest and competition for diminishing resources will increase the geostrategic importance of certain areas in the Middle East, Asia, and the polar regions. States experiencing instability will require interoperability, cooperation between a wide range of joint and coalition military forces, as well as non-state actors, international institutes, non-government organizations, contractors, and individuals. This will require a broadened and effective whole-of-government approach to address challenges. Support to states experiencing instability will demand the development of well-led organizations to ensure the effective integration of a comprehensive spectrum of complex and time-sensitive activities. Instability and societal tensions brought about by grievances and the perceptions of inequality will result in the likelihood of conflict. Should this affect national and multilateral interests, the likelihood of intervention to provide support for legitimate governance structures will occur. Stabilization operations will likely be the normative option to assist states experiencing instability. Alliances, temporary and permanent, will likely form, and established alliances will likely be adapted to meet new challenges. European powers and NATO will likely remain the defense organization of choice, but there will be an increasing range of political, legal, ethical, and financial imperatives that will lead to building relationships with like-minded partners. It is unlikely that there will be an end to radicalism, terrorism, and extremism. New technologies and grievances, both perceived and real, will provide new opportunities and venues for groups to promulgate their ideas and form up. These threats will operate transnationally, requiring intimate cooperation and multinational cooperation between security and intelligence services, police, and border security organizations to provide an effective response to any threat. The traditionally broad qualitative technological advantage in full-spectrum military equipment will likely be lost by the West. The West's traditional paradigm of war, that technology can replace mass, will inevitably be challenged. There will likely be a proliferation of advanced weapons. It is highly likely that technological parity between adversaries will witness the escalation of casualty rates. Potential threats in the form of state and non-state actors will leverage high technology niche capabilities and focus their employment in innovative ways. Moreover, traditional power projection strategies will now be vulnerable to the regional powers possessing precision-guided missiles and advances in anti-access technologies, which will likely make any traditional force projection operation complex and indeed problematic. The dramatic advances in the scientific realm, particularly robotics, nanotechnology, and cognitive science, combined with dramatic improved computing sensors, will likely see dramatic improvements in combat capabilities. The possibility of robotic armies may be a reality. Societies will become increasingly dependent upon their information and indications technology, IC212, which is defined as the entire infrastructure, organization, personnel, and components that collect, process, store, transmit, display, disseminate, and act on information. These systems will depend increasingly on space-based assets to receive or transmit data and information across the electromagnetic spectrum. Hence, cybersecurity will remain of paramount importance for societies and their respective militaries to survive and be effective. Cyberspace will be targeted by all types of actors seeking to exploit weaknesses in order to cause disruption, notwithstanding the impact of their actions will vary. Like Putin's active measures campaign against the Ukraine, the attribution will be in doubt. The world in 2050 era will be likely experienced to be very unpredictable and possibly devastating, and will probably experience strategic shocks, an EMP attack, an equivalent 9/11, a WMD, a loss of fish stocks. Predicated upon the complexity and global interconnectivity and interdependence, these systems will be highly vulnerable and subject to targeting. Those organizations and states that have agility and versatility will likely be successful in adapting to turbulent and ever-changing geopolitical environment. To conclude, I hope these futuristic tidbits may provide you with some context and insight into the challenges that future leaders and the governments will likely confront from 2020 to 2050. As the Chinese say, may you live in interesting times. Thank you.